If you could just state your name and title for the record, please.
Oliver Hermanus, director of Moffie.
This is a beautiful movie, man. It's so crazy that we had to wait a year. I'm assuming it's because of the pandemic to see it.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a hit with a lot of people. Now, my first project obviously is I know that you co-wrote it and it's based on a book. But how did the project fall on your lap?
Yeah, the producers who are based here in London, I just got an email from one of them and asked, he was flying to South Africa and he asked if I was free to take a meeting. And that's how, yeah, that we had a conversation over lunch. And 4 years later, we made the film.
Was there anything in particular that drew you to this project?
It's interesting because I initially wasn't drawn to the project just because the book is ultimately about the trauma and the suffering of white South African men during apartheid. And myself not being a white South African, it was sort of a strange ask for me to make an apartheid set film about that particular lens on apartheid. So it took a bit of deliberation on my part, but I found my way into it when I focused on the rewrites of the book, and so it became more personal to me. So it was a bit of a journey to find the Moffie that is what the film is now, because it's very much not what the book actually is.
Oh, good. And that leads into my next question. I really love just the tone of it all, and it kind of feels like a perfect mix between like the first half of Stanley Kubrick's first the Full Metal Jacket, also with like a twist of Moonlight. And like I said, it's based on a book, and you said it's based on a book. But how much exactly is pulled from the source material? Because it feels like some parts may not have actually happened, or there are definitely some parts that feel a little bit less realistic. So if you had to give me like a percentage, what would you say?
From the book, I mean, the book is a very different story. The book is far more of a love story. So we spent a good amount of time doing actual research. So in fact, a lot of what is in our film is based more on like oral history of other soldiers. So a lot of that is very accurate in terms of the boot camp and in terms of the nature of what the clandestine kind of interaction between the men was. So in a way, the percentage is pretty high in terms of the texture, the detail of what is based in reality. But from the book, I'd say we probably took about under 10%.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Now, one of my favorite and one of the most effective sequences in the film is this long tracking shot you have, like right smack dab in the middle, where we see a young Nick come out of the pool and into the shower, and there's like this whole thing. Where did the idea for that sequence come from?
In terms of the way we shot it,
Yeah.
it was at the very beginning. I knew that if I was going to do a flashback, I wanted to kind of make it in a way also a sort of technical kind of challenge. And it was one of the first conversations I had with the director of photography, was that I just wanted to have something that would operate on its own as an interesting sort of interlude. And it took a lot of planning because it was a combination of I mean, it's very detailed in terms of like, I mean, if you knew what was going on behind the scenes in terms of a man being on a crane, coming off a crane, walking, like being the camera being kind of dismantled as he's walking, it really is a performance, and it actually took more than just over a day and a half to shoot.
What are you hoping that people take away from this film? Obviously, the film is not set in present day. Like you said, it has to do with a white male who's kind of coming to terms with his sexuality.
Yeah.
So it is, but it isn't relevant. So what are you hoping that audiences kind of walk away from this film with?
And Moffie operates on many levels. It operates on the South African level. It has a very obvious kind of messaging to other South Africans. I think on an international level, it is an exploration of masculinity and toxic masculinity, and obviously the sort of the machinery that kind of exists in many societies, that has existed in many societies to mold men into a particular kind of formation and form that has major ramifications if you think about the way the world, what we're facing with today when we talk about gender-based violence and things like that. So I think on that kind of that level, Moffie is making commentary about how men are made.
I totally got that, and I really especially liked what you said about like how it deals with toxic masculinity. But another thing that I really admired about the film was how it touches on like uh, the texture. I guess that's the right word. A word I would use of discrimination. Really, how
Yes.
you have all these guys fighting against people because of the color of their skin, but at the
Hmm.
same time, there are different types of ways to dislike people or judge people. So I also think that the film, like you said, on a very different level, also tackles that. Um, now, this is my final question, and you kind of spoke about it at the very beginning, how you weren't so interested in taking it on because
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
a white male during apartheid, and it's so interesting, like the psychology of the film, how on paper we shouldn't root for this character really. He is on the wrong side, but you manage through some excellent writing and some really effective directing managed to really make us care about him. Now why do you think as a filmmaker that's important, that regardless of who our main character is, that you manage to get the audience to really level with him?
I mean, it is important, of course, for an audience to care sufficiently about the protagonist of a film. Otherwise, it makes the viewing of the film kind of challenging and often probably a failure. I mean, the nature of storytelling is finding. I think for me personally, the nature of storytelling is allowing an audience, or giving an audience an opportunity to experience life from the perspective of somebody else. It might not always be somebody that you immediately have a resonance with or share a certain life experience or race or sexuality or political outlook. I think that is ultimately what we hope from storytelling, is that stories allow us to understand other people's perspectives on things and other people's challenges and hindrances and other people's limitations and other people's growths. And I think that's ultimately what made me make the film, because my immediate reaction to reading the source material was not knowing or not really seeing why I would want to make it. And then realizing that, in fact, the benefit of making this film for me personally would be that exact journey, would be for me to be able to understand how white South African men during apartheid were institutionalized and what the world looked like from their perspective, particularly, as you said, their treatment and interaction with Black people and other races. The film intentionally positions you in, no matter what your race is or the audience's race is, it positions the audience in the perspective of white South Africa. And that has, I think, a power to it in terms of how we understand how the other half or the other side thinks about things.
Ah man, I can't wait for people to see this movie. I really do think you have a hit on your hands, man. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your
Thank
day
you.
to
I
speak
appreciate
with
it.
me. Yeah, no, and
Absolutely.
I wish you the best of luck with it. Is there anything else that you want to add about it?
No, if you've got what you need, I'm very happy. Thank you.
Fantastic. It was a pleasure speaking with you, Oliver. I
You
wish you the
too.
best of luck.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care.